Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Ordinary Council meeting Tuesday the 6th of August at the Omeo Recreation Reserve. Our second meeting in Omeo since the amalgamation days, so it's very pleasing to be back up here, and thank you to those who have come out to experience a council meeting in Omeo. I'll just say that East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting to enhance the accessibility of its meetings to the broader East Gippsland community. These recordings are also archived and available for viewing by the public or used for publicity or information purposes. At the appropriate times during the meeting, any members of the gallery who are addressing the council will have their image, comments or submissions recorded. Please ensure that your mobile phones and other electronic devices are turned off or in silent during the duration of the meeting. So on behalf of Council, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting, and I pay my respects to the elders past and present and the elders from other communities who may be here today. 1.2, apologies, Mr. CEO.
Madam Mayor, I have one apology from Councillor Roberts.
Thank you. Item 1.3, declaration of conflict of interest.
I have a conflict of interest, Madam Mayor, I believe, with regards to 1.1.1, the petition about the upgrades to the Delegate Road because of the log trucks.
Thank you for that, Councillor Peltz. Item 1.4, confirmation of minutes. That the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on Tuesday the 25th of June 2019 be confirmed. Thanks, Councillor Rotino. Second. Thanks, Councillor Peltz. All those in favour? Councillor Buckley? Thanks. Okay. This motion's carried. Item 1.5, next meeting is Ordinary Council meeting Tuesday the 10th of September 2019 to be held at the Corporate Centre, 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale, commencing at 6 p.m. Item 1.6, requests for leaves of absence.
Madam Mayor, Councillor Rotino has advised that he will not be at the 10th of September meeting, so just for councillors to note.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Item 1.7, requests to speak about your community project.
We've had nil requests, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Item 1.8 is public question time, and we've received 2 questions. Mr. Lee Fulton, would you like to come forward and speak to your questions, or would you like the CEO to read them out? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This first question is from Lee Fulton of Omeo. Can an audit of street and directional signage in the Omeo region be performed to identify 1, missing signs, 2, signs that are not clear, 3, signs that need repair? The audit should note the authority which has a responsibility for each sign. Signage requirements should be judged as if through the eyes of the first-time visitor. And I will defer that to Ms. Weigel.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Certainly in the last 2 days that we've been out and about meeting with the community and looking at various projects, the issue of signage has been raised several times. Rather than just say yes to this question, I'd like to take the question on notice so we can really unpack it and make sure that we can structure our resources to undertake it in a really meaningful way. So I acknowledge that there is a need for us to look at signage in this area, but I would like to take it on notice so we can work out a plan with the Omeo community, in particular the BTA, about how we may be able to address that moving forward.
Madam Mayor, the second question also from Mr. Fulton of Omeo. Question, Council Budget Document Presentation. Can the annual budgets have a summary section for several specified geographic areas within the Shire? The main focus on capital and project expenditures. It needn't necessarily balance. Areas could be Bairnsdale, Paintsville, Lakes, Orbost Marlow, Mallacoota, Omeo region, etc. The budget could perhaps be a better document to sell the terrific, in brackets or otherwise, job that is being planned by council in each area. I will refer that to Ms Aston.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr Fulton. That's a fantastic suggestion. I think it's a terrific idea, and I'm very happy to take that back to our Manager Finance for further discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So item 1.9 is record of assemblies of councillors for June, July 2019. Thanks, Councillor Rotino. Do we have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Peltz. All those in favour? Thanks. It's carried. Okay. Item 1.10.1 is petitions. As we have a conflict of interest declared by Councillor Peltz. Thank you. So the petition is the degradation of Delegate River Road and bridges and Bonang Road Bridge by log trucks. Ms Aston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As Madam Mayor said, this report informs Council of a petition forwarded from the Office of Tim Bull, submitted by Alan Reid on behalf of residents of Delegate River and commuters of Delegate River Road and Bonang Road, which asks Council to provide a suspension of the use of the roads and bridges by log trucks. The recommendation that's before Council today is that Council receives the petition that's lodged by Alan Reid, notes that the report on the issues raised will be presented for consideration at a future meeting, and notes that Council officers will write to the head petitioners advising them of these actions.
Thank you, Ms Aston. Are there any questions from the councillors? No. Councillor Reeves, you've moved. Yep. Thank you. Councillor Rotino, second. All those in favour? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 2, notices of motion and or rescission. Nil received. Item 3, deferred business. 3.1, adoption of the draft Eagle Point Structure Plan, which we will hear in later reports. That takes us to councillor reports, and I'll ask Councillor Toohey to speak to his report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My report is reasonably short. I have supplied it to our staff. Probably the one thing I'd like to highlight is I went to a fundraiser, Captured in Africa Foundation, which was very interesting. Learnt a lot in regards to the degradation of lions and tigers in South Africa, and the effects that it's having on the economy over there, and just exactly what's happening with lion and tiger population worldwide, and the decline of that, which is down to about 5% of what it was 100 years ago. Very, very interesting fundraiser to go to. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Toohey. Councillor Rotino.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, Madam Mayor, I'd like to acknowledge that there's a history making here today with having the first ever Omeo Mayor presiding over an Omeo meeting here in Omeo. So, congratulations.
What conflict of interest is there?
Madam Mayor, I've submitted my report, but the one item I would like to talk about was our visiting keynote speaker of 2 weeks ago, themed Owning Our Future, Celebrating the Potential of Regional Business. This was a fitting theme for our visiting keynote speaker, and many thanks to our East Gippsland Shire Economic Development Unit for coordinating this year's speaker, Gillian Kilby. Gillian was visiting, and she has set up what's called the Exchange in Dubbo, New South Wales. Gillian has been described as having the logical thinking of a civil engineer and the roll-up sleeves attitude of a farmer's daughter. There was a great crowd on Thursday evening, around 130. Councillor Reeves and Councillor Roberts were also present, along with yourself and Councillor Toohey. Gillian approaches life optimistically and delivered an inspiring keynote address to this crowd of 130 people. Gillian was extremely generous with her time, having addressed the East Gippsland secondary students during the afternoon prior to the event, and conducting another breakfast follow-up event, and then also up here at the annual M&D fundraiser event. Gillian's created a co-working space as a start-up incubator in Dubbo, And I know from the night there's been a lot of discussions around what could be possible around East Gippsland along similar themes. Along with these other businesses, Gillian runs her own civil engineering business, which enjoys both national and international business from her regional New South Wales home base. Gillian commenced her business called the Infrastructure Collaborative. This collaborative works hard to create thriving regional communities by shifting regional infrastructure priorities from planning shelves to be shovel-ready through being able to advocate on a united front whenever they approach either level of government. The Infrastructure Collaborative refocuses infrastructure conversations around the benefits to the community, productivity for agriculture, safe and secure water supplies, or access across regions. It was a great networking night which has inspired many within our region, and hopefully this type of event can become part of our annual economic development calendar. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Rotino. Councillor Reeves.
Yeah, here, Councillor Rotino. Thanks for that. I also attended that presentation by Gillian Kilby, and it was spectacular. But ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to just note in particular the citizenship ceremony this month, and these are always fabulous events and a real celebration of the realisation of becoming an Australian citizen. And it's difficult to imagine, ladies and gentlemen, in our safe and privileged country that this is not available to so many people across the world. It's the second year we have taken the council meetings to the community. These have a price, but hopefully you who are here see the value. Why do I say this? Well, there's been some negative press around the expense of operating the Shire per councillor recently, usually compared with small and very different settings and shires. Ours is the second biggest shire in the state. And I wish I received the figure quoted as the councillor expense, something like $54,000 or something. I think we were being paid. That was what was listed in the press. Far from that, ladies and gentlemen, far from it. We just don't receive that. Ours is a huge shire. The value of democracy, engagement and community participation is only apparent when one compares this with the cost to countries, people and communities who don't have it. Citizenship ceremonies, being here at Omeo and meeting our good locals are a reminder of the investment, not the cost, of good governance. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Reeves. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Briefly is about the passing. I assume it's the passing of my friend Parker, and he had a lot of other friends as well in a crash up in Fiji. Gilbert Parker, he was one of these blokes who could turn his hand to anything except perhaps domestic bliss, and was a great supporter of local things, particularly sports. I remember once we were very short of footballers, and this fella hadn't played any competition football before, and he acquitted himself extremely well. And, you know, he was a great fellow around this district, and he'd been operating out of New Guinea for a little while and establishing quite a business there. So, anyway, I'm very sorry to have to report that, because many of you would have known him quite well. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Buckley. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll follow the trend of reports today and just say that I've prepared a written report in relation to the number of meetings that I've attended over the past month. I'll just draw Council's attention to a couple of things. One is the passing of Mr Rob Cook, the Secretary of the Paintsville Maritime Museum. Rob was a real driving force, and any councillor that had been confronted by Rob would know his passion for that particular museum, its activities, and of course he was also the author of their most informative newsletter on the history of the maritime activities at Paintsville. I would like to express my sincere condolences to Mr Cook's wife Jan and their family and friends. I'm just going to touch on something that's impacted me and others just more recently, and I don't want to go too far into it because it blurs the lines of government, and that you know, which is council has been accused of this across the industry, including in the Herald Sun just recently, where we step outside the third tier of government and go into matters of the second tier. But having attended yet another funeral yesterday of a young man who died in unexpected circumstances. I consider that we should, as a community, start to look at what we have in our community to help young men and in fact all members of our community in facing those black moments in life. And I encourage members of the state parliament on either side of government to address that, and particularly here in East Gippsland, in where we have very poor or limited amount of service. I shouldn't say the word poor. And I really would like to emphasise that for all of us as caring members of the community, to look to these problems and to address them. I'll leave that those words at that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Councillor White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and fellow councillors. I would just like to mention a few of the things that have been involved in this last month. Still, because of the drought, I have quite a big involvement now in these committees and subcommittees which have met again, because we are certainly not through this drought at this stage. So just to let people know that the council is still actively involved in trying to find solutions and a way through this for all of our communities. We also had our quarterly audit committee meeting, which I attended, and perhaps a highlight for me was an MAV development weekend that was held in Ballarat the weekend before last, in that I have to congratulate them on the quality of that workshop and the absolute quality of the guest speakers that they had, and the subjects, which were incredibly current, right in our face, things like the problems in waste management and recycling that's affecting a lot of councils, and the fact that right now we unfortunately are seeing a large quantity of what should be recycled going into landfills, particularly for the suburban councils, because they do not have a landfill facility, so then they have to try and find space where somebody has a hole in the ground, and it's not an ideal situation at all. There was also very topical was a guest speaker who spoke on and was involved in some of these recent council dismissals, and he just went through the process to explain to us what had happened and why, and what the outcomes were. So, and of course the most recent one being South Gippsland. And then something else that's probably relevant not only to councils but to all workplaces, there was an incredibly good guest speaker who spoke on bullying and toxic behaviour within workplaces, and he was exceptionally good, and like he really did hit a nerve, and got great applause at the end of it, because I could see around the room that he engaged everybody there, because they possibly all had something in the back of their mind that they related to this. So that was just, as I said, it was an extremely informative weekend, and I did enjoy participating. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Peltz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I'd like to reflect on, I recently was fortunate enough to have a trip overseas and ended up unexpectedly in Washington DC, and what I wanted to share with you was some of the innovative tourist things that are happening over there, and to my delight I saw Uber e-bikes and Uber scooters being lying all over the pavements and things in the city area. So within the CBD there was this new innovative usage of an e-scooter, and quite unusually the business people were using it to get on at the front of their offices, and they would travel down their streets, deliver documents and get back on and travel back up the street again to their office. They paid $1.25 for the initial usage, and then 5 cents a minute after that. So it was a very cost-effective, cheap mechanism of transport, instead of having to wait for a cab or to walk or to catch a bus of some sort. It was instant, and it was very effective, and I thought, I was curious as to how this might be used in our community. It was not only the businesses using it, but was also the tourists, and the tourists were mainly people of maybe in their early 30s that would have young children. They're travelling around, or anyone that's used a scooter or a skateboard or something of that type whilst they were growing up, and they were very useful. They had a throttle and a brake, and you just stood on it and went. It was all E-operated, and you just picked it up at the sidewalk and got on it and went, and then put it on the sidewalk, and somebody else came along and used it after you. So I was curious as to how long it would take for our community to utilise this, but I thought it was a very effective, useful tool of providing transport in a business community, but also to the tourist market, which I've found a bit exciting. So I wanted to share that with you. But one other thing that we as a council group have requested to the Mayor, and we've asked her to follow up from the recent current affair program in regards to the Bairnsdale Secondary College that aired on the 22nd of July this year. And we've asked the Mayor to write to the Minister of Education, the Honourable James Molino MP, and have requested that he take some consideration with regards to the damage that's been done to our community with regards to the program's airing. Whilst Council would normally not comment on school operation matters, the councillors were appalled at the representation of this school and how it has impacted the community. The negative press and this does little to address issues raised in our community. This kind of negative press simply highlights many of the challenges facing rural and regional communities, and we thought it was a great opportunity to warmly invite the Minister to come down and come and see for himself, and to help mend this community from the damage that's been done by the current affair program. And we'd strongly ask him to come and meet with the students, the families and the teachers, and to send a strong message from the Andrews State Government, the commitment of the work and the school improvement programs that the Labor government has committed to. We know that they've committed to the funding of the stage 2 of the redevelopment of the secondary college, and we'd like this to be endorsed by his representation in our community. So we've asked our Mayor to, on behalf of our council, to send the invitation out to the Minister and to help our community mend from what's the damage that's been caused. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Peltz. Just a couple of things that I'd like to touch on over the last month. I was pleased to officially open the new Gippsland Solar Showroom in Bairnsdale, which, despite the challenging times that some businesses are going through at the moment, it's great to see a small business establish itself and see the prospects that East Gippsland have, and they are employing 6 full-time staff, including 1 apprentice. So that's a great news story for our region. On that same day, I was also able to officially open the new and improved upgrade of the Bairnsdale Aquatic Centre, which was a $6.5 million project co-funded by the state government and carried out by local contractor Brooker Builders, and it's an absolute credit to them and the Shire for completing a significant project. And during that time, membership numbers also increased for the pool. So, and since the new and improved facilities have gone in, the number of people visiting the pool has been incredible. So it's a great asset for our area. And lastly, I just wanted to talk about the 5th annual Business of Sport luncheon that was held in support of the MND. We have a local resident here who's been suffering from MND for a number of years, and it's always a great event to support that resident. And over 100 people were fortunate enough to hear from a range of guest speakers, including former AFL greats, a current AFL women's player, and also Gillian Kilby. And $2,500 was raised through the auction, which will be donated to Omeo District Health. And I'll leave it there. So moving on to our officer reports now. 5.1.1 is the report on Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 23rd of July 2019. Ms. Aston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a report that comes to Council on a quarterly basis following each Audit and Risk Committee meeting. As Madam Mayor said, this is for the Audit and Risk Committee that was held on the 23rd of July. It outlines just an overview of the issues that were discussed, and the recommendation to councillors is obviously to note the report and the issues that were tabled and discussed at the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms Aston. Are there any questions from the councillors? Councillor Rotino.
It's not so much a question, Madam Mayor, but more a statement, and it relates to the VAGO report tabled May 2019, which has been referred to our Audit and Risk Committee to challenge and check our protocols and ensure that we're doing everything we can in relation to some of the issues raised in that VAGO report. But interestingly, whilst there was no significant fraudulent activity identified through that report, I believe that some of the activities are not representative of the modern workplace protocols or behaviours, and I'll be certainly making some of those points when it comes back to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rotino. Any further questions or comments from the councillors? No, we have a recommendation before you. Thanks, Councillor Rotino. Thanks, Councillor Reeves. All those in favour? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 5.1.2, review of council policies, the risk management policy. Ms Aston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The risk management policy is normally reviewed by councillors once a year. It was last reviewed in September 2018. It's proposed through this report that the policy be reviewed every 3 years instead of annually, and this particular iteration has only got administrative changes to it. It was reviewed by the Audit and Risk Committee at its meeting on the 20th of April 2019, and the recommendation is before you, councillors.
Thanks, Ms Aston. Are there any questions, councillors? Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Mayor. Ms Aston, just can you remind us why we're moving to 3-year reviews rather than 1-year reviews, please?
Absolutely. Last year we councillors reviewed the OHS policy, and that was a policy that was reviewed annually, and it was recommended at that time due to the lack of changes that occur each year to that policy that it be changed to 3 years, which we did, and it was also mooted at that meeting that the same happened with the risk management policy. It's anticipated that there's going to be no loss of efficacy, and with our consistency that's been demonstrated in Council's position on risk management and also the legislation each year, hence the reason that a 3-year review instead of annual be proposed.
Councillor Peltz.
If I may, Ms Aston, can you just clarify whether that's consistent with councillors' obligation of the local laws and our duty of care?
Yes, that has been reviewed and checked, Councillor Peltz, and that is in line with legislation and also what other councils are doing too. And that's not to say that if there's any changes that occur within those 3 years that the policy can't be updated either.
No further questions. Councillor Peltz, happy to move. Councillor Reeves, second it. All those in favour? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. 5.1.3, Investment Policy Review 2019. Ms Aston.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The investment policy is a key financial management document that provides clear directives for the investment of surplus cash while also minimising risk to council through any investment decisions made. This has been reviewed by our Manager Finance. It's reviewed annually to ensure that it continues to reflect industry best practice and council's approach to risk. It's recommended in this report that the review is changed from annual to biannual. The review that's been conducted this year, there was only one minor amendment that was identified under the investment in locally based financial institutions section with an inclusion of one sentence there. Council's Audit and Risk Committee reviewed this revised policy at its meeting held on 23rd of July, and the recommendation is before you.
Thanks, Ms Aston. Are there any questions? Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Ms Aston. Can you just also remind us about how our investment policy might support local communities?
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. I'm not fully across the detail of that one, so potentially, Mr. CEO.
Through you, Madam Chair. The council, and part of this policy, it does allow for council to invest in local community banks, for example, particularly where they're on a startup process. So there is a mechanism within the investment. There are quite strict rules governing how councils invest their money, but within its policy framework, it does allow for example support for some local banks, such as community banks, and again, for example, at Mallacoota.
Thanks, Mayor. It's good to have that on the record. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Reeves. There's no further questions. There's a recommendation before you. Do we have a... Thanks, Councillor Peltz. Seconder. Thanks, Councillor Toohey. All those in favour? Motion is carried unanimously. Item 5.2.1, the adoption of the draft Eagle Point Structure Plan. Ms Reynolds.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, councillors, Mr CEO, general managers and members of the public. Today I am here to present for adoption, recommendation for adoption to Council of the draft Eagle Point Structure Plan. You may recall that we presented this item at the July Council meeting, and the item was deferred with a request for us to undertake some further conversations with some landowners in relation to some oral submissions. I'm pleased to announce that we were able to have those and continue those conversations with the landowners as requested, and we've been able to provide opportunity for further discussions on these complex issues and provide further explanation as to where the Eagle Point Structure Plan is proposing for our strategic direction. Given the complexity of the issues raised, we were unable to resolve the issues at the meetings. However, a greater understanding of our position was able to be put forward. The structure plan needs to take a strategic direction on these important issues with respect to review of the restrictive covenant, bushfire management and protection of the Eagle Point of the East Gippsland water assets and infrastructure. Our next step is to continue these conversations with the landowners as we move towards, subject to adoption today, as we move towards the preparation of planning scheme amendment documentation. Just by way of summary. So the purpose today is to present for adoption the draft Eagle Point Structure Plan. Our precinct structure plan is a high-level master plan. Just my apologies. It's a structure plan is a high-level master plan for the whole of the township. It's an approach that we've taken to establish a vision for the township and prepare a series of technical reports. Planning consultants were appointed in 2016 with an emerging options paper released for the community in June 2017. We released the draft structure plan for community comment in September 2018. As a result, the final draft has been amended to include some references and a new chapter with respect to natural hazards relating specifically to bushfire and flooding. The structure plan proposes a vision statement for Eagle Point and proposes a settlement boundary and some key strategic directions for sites. The key issues that we've addressed as part of this structure plan is we've addressed bushfire management planning with respect to augmenting our consideration of the issue within the structure plan. We've also added reference to flooding resilience. The structure plan takes a neighbourhood character position on the issue in relation to the restrictive covenant, and a future planning scheme will address these particular details with respect to the current review of the restrictive covenant. The structure plan will enable the growth of the Eagle Point Primary School on the current site. The structure plan will allow the continuation of the Eagle Point Community Hall at its current location. The structure plan also proposes to include recognition and protection of the East Gippsland wastewater treatment plant for the growth areas. You will also note that in the recommendation, we have referred to a future community consultation process with respect to the place naming requests that have been raised as part of the consultation process. So in summary, the recommendation is fivefold. The recommendation seeks your resolution to adopt the draft Eagle Point Structure Plan. The second recommendation seeks to allow us to continue discussions with the CFA with respect to making sure that bushfire management protection is sound within our future documentation. The third recommendation seeks to commence the preparation of the planning scheme amendment documentation, which is the next step with the implementation of the key strategies. The fourth notes budgetary, normal standard budgetary processes associated with the planning process. And the fifth refers to the place naming, which is a separate statutory process. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Ms Reynolds. Are there questions from the councillors? Councillor Reeves.
Thanks, Ms Reynolds, and thanks for coming back to us and having had that consultation with those people. You mentioned that you hope that they understood our position. Do we understand their position? That's my first question. And the second is, are we 100% comfortable that we have undertaken a consultation that is able to embrace the broad views of the residents of Eagle Point?
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. As part of this process, which has now been re-energised over the last 2 years, there has been a very extensive community consultation process. So the answer to your first question, with the specific landowners, I am able to say today at the table that we have a very good and deep understanding of the issues that remain outstanding as part of the future going forward, as part of the resolution. The community consultation process more generally over the last 2 years has been quite extensive and included a series of landowner meetings for particular strategic sites. It's included drop-in sessions, it's included a have your say mechanism, and on each step we've also followed up with all of our community members with a release of what we heard consultation paper, which we were able to mail out to individual landowners as part of each of the milestones. So as far as community consultation, I believe that it has been extensive and we have listened to issues, and that the structure plan as presented today is representative of a general community consensus on the key issues about the future directions of Eagle Point. There are outstanding issues that are often when we come to land use planning, but we will continue to work through these issues as part of the next steps.
Any further questions? No? Thanks, Councillor Rotino. Do I have a seconder? Councillor White. All those in favour? Oh, you want to speak to it? Sorry?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Certainly I see this as a really critical piece of work. Eagle Point's 13 kilometres southeast of Bairnsdale, some 3 kilometres to Paintsville, and as of 2016 had 843 residents. This is a key piece of work that will create Eagle Point in its own right, a precinct, and having ridden my bike through there on many winter days even, it is just a beautiful precinct. So this piece of work will go a long way to establishing that precinct even further. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rotino. Councillor White, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to say to Nicole, for her hard work, her effort, her commitment to this project, I'd just like to congratulate you very much, and I think for the residents of Eagle Point, they will get the benefits of your hard work. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor White. Any further speakers? I'll put the motion to you. All those in favour? Motion carried unanimously. Item 6, urgent and other business. Right. So we now will go into camera and deal with some contractual matters. So we will have to ask the gallery to leave for a short while and then return upon conclusion of those matters.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll I'd like to move that Council now close the meeting to the public in accordance with the provisions of Section 89(2)D of the Local Government Act 1989 to consider items 7.1 to 7.5 as these items relate to contractual matters.
Thanks, Councillor Reeves. All those in favour? Motion is carried.